Does the soul weigh 21 grams and the animal soul does not? At death, everything ends. Or maybe it just begins. Imagine someone claiming that at the precise moment life fades, the body becomes lighter. Not by kilograms, not even by half, just by 21 grams. Is this a measurement error or a coincidence? At the beginning of the 20th century, a certain doctor decided to find out. He was not a mystic. He was not a philosopher. He was a scientist. And he wanted to use a scale to answer a question that humanity has been asking for thousands of years. Does a human have a soul? Part 1. The doctor who wanted to weigh the soul. Duncan MacDougall was not a character on the fringes of fantasy. He was a practicing physician in Massachusetts, an educated man, associated with the Haverhill Medical Society. He lived at a time when science was taking increasingly bold steps towards discovering the secrets of life, but also of death. His passion was the study of the invisible and the attempt to give it a physical dimension. MacDougall believed that if the soul exists, it cannot be completely immaterial. If it influences our decisions, emotions, and way of thinking, it must affect the body. And if it does, then perhaps it can be detected, measured, or weighed. This belief was not based on religion, but on a fascination with the idea that everything real leaves a trace in reality. The doctor already had some experience with physiology. He was interested in the changes that occur in the body during death throes. It was then that the idea of creating an extremely precise scale on which a dying person could be placed was born, and to see if anything changes in the body's mass when breathing and heartbeat cease. His colleagues viewed the idea with a mixture of skepticism and trepidation. Studying death in such a direct physical way was considered ethically wrong at the time. But MacDougall was determined. He wanted answers, and he was willing to risk his reputation to get them. In 1907, he received permission to conduct an experiment that would solve one of the greatest mysteries of existence. But before the actual research could begin, more than just a theory had to be prepared. A device had to be created that could capture the invisible. Part 2. The birth of a controversial experiment. It all started with the construction of a device the likes of which the world had never seen before. MacDougall knew that if he wanted to measure changes in mass at the moment of death, he had to have an absolutely precise instrument. So he ordered a specially designed bed, mounted on a sensitive industrial scale, that could register even the smallest fluctuations in weight, down to a few grams. The challenge was not just the technique, but finding the right patients. They had to be people who were close to death but lying still, with no sudden movements that could disrupt the measurements. MacDougall decided to work with a local hospice. He obtained permission to observe 6 people dying of tuberculosis, a debilitating disease that was not associated with violent convulsions. Each case was treated individually. The patient was placed on a scale bed many hours before expected death, so that the equipment could stabilize. The doctor and his assistants kept a constant watch, recording each change in weight with almost religious accuracy. The key moment was when all signs of life ceased. That is when the potential loss of weight associated with the soul leaving the body would occur. The experiment was conducted in silence and concentration. There was no question of errors. In principle, everything had to be done according to strictly defined procedures. No one had ever tried to capture the moment of death in such a mathematical way before. No one had ever tried to give the immaterial aspect of existence a specific number. From the outside, it looked like cold calculation, but in reality, it was an act of extreme curiosity, an attempt to capture the greatest mystery of life within numerical limits. Part 3. Results that surprised the world. After weeks of preparation and long hours of vigil, MacDougall finally recorded what he had been waiting for, the moment when life left the body. It was then, according to his observations, that something extraordinary would happen. In one of the tests, the weight dropped dramatically. The body of the deceased became 21 grams lighter. The difference was not gradual. The change occurred suddenly, as if something had instantly left the body. This was not a one-time occurrence. MacDougall had recorded similar weight losses in several cases. Although not all the results were identical, one person lost 17 grams, another 24. The 21-gram figure had recurred often enough to be considered crucial. In the doctor's opinion, This could indicate the presence of something solid, intangible under normal conditions, that evaporated at the precise moment of death. MacDougall published his findings in the journal American Medicine. The article caused a sensation. The media seized on the story with headlines like "Proof of the Soul" and "Man loses part of himself at death." Readers ranged from delight to disbelief. The doctor did not claim to have proven the existence of the soul in a religious sense. He merely suggested that there was something physical that disappeared with life. Interestingly, MacDougall himself was surprised by the unambiguity of some of the results. He considered this material to require further study. Unfortunately, his experiment was never conducted on a larger scale. But the number that appeared in it, 21 grams, took on a life of its own. And to this day, it functions in pop culture as a symbol of the mystery of human existence. Part 4. The Voice of Science, a Wave of Criticism. The publication of MacDougall's results provoked an almost immediate reaction from the scientific community. Although some of the public was fascinated, many doctors and physiologists approached his research with great reserve from the beginning. The most common criticisms concerned the lack of reproducibility, the limited number of cases, and the insufficient supervision of the experimental conditions. One of the main problems that was highlighted was the instability of the measurements. The scale, although precise for its time, could be susceptible to minor disturbances, air movement, temperature changes, patient body movements. None of the results were clearly documented in a way that would allow other researchers to independently confirm them. And this, in the world of science, is the basis for recognizing an experiment as credible. There were also ethical concerns. At the time, there were no precise regulations regarding research involving dying patients. Critics claimed that the experiment treated death too technically, stripping it of its dignity. Some accused MacDougall of an instrumental approach to people whose final moments of life were observed more like a laboratory experiment than a moment of final farewell to existence. A serious blow to the researcher's credibility was that he did not publish the full raw data. The information that did reach the press was based on his summaries and interpretations, not on the actual measurement tables. This raised suspicions that his conclusions might be exaggerated or selectively selected. As a result, despite a brief moment of fame, the academic community did not accept MacDougall's results as a breakthrough. They were considered more of a curiosity than evidence, and the researcher himself, although he did not abandon the subject, increasingly isolated himself from the scientific mainstream. Part 5. Dogs Without a Soul, an experiment that caused outrage. After completing his human studies, Duncan MacDougall decided to expand the scope of his experiments. This time, his focus was animals, specifically dogs. His goal was to see if a similar loss of mass also occurred in the death of an organism other than humans. If the soul does indeed leave the body, does this only apply to humans? To this end, the doctor organized a series of tests in which he used stray dogs brought to a state of extreme exhaustion. The method was brutal. The animals were given strong sedatives and then waited for the natural cessation of vital functions. The bodies were placed on the same scales that he had previously used to examine people. Measurements were taken with the same accuracy and care. The results were unambiguous. None of the tests showed a loss of mass at the moment of death. MacDougall announced that this confirmed his thesis. Man possesses something unique that animals lack. In his interpretation, a soul. The reaction was immediate and harsh. Animal rights groups, though small and uninfluential at the time, expressed deep outrage. Even some proponents of consciousness research called the experiment inhumane and unnecessarily cruel. Articles appeared in the press criticizing not only the methodology, but the morality of MacDougall's actions. From an ethical perspective, the dog experiment went down in history as a dark chapter. It brought no recognition. It did not open new scientific paths. Instead, it deepened the controversy and once again posed the question, how far can one go in the name of knowledge? And is every answer worth the price? Part 6. Modern Science and the Mystery of the 21 Grams. In the decades that followed, no one repeated MacDougall's experiment under identical conditions. However, the topic of weight loss at death has occasionally returned to scientific discussion, although usually from a completely different perspective. Instead of soul-searching, researchers have become interested in the physiological processes that can lead to sudden weight changes. One hypothesis is that microscopic amounts of air may have left the lungs with the last exhalation. Another suggests that at the moment of death, there may be a sudden contraction of smooth muscle, which could affect the distribution of body fluids in the body. Changes in pressure, heat loss, and sweat gland activity are also considered. All of these factors may cause minute differences in mass, although no theory explains the sudden, steady drop by a specific amount. In 2003, speculations began to emerge about the possibility of using modern scanners and sensors to record changes in the body just before death. Some of these studies were purely theoretical, others were limited to observations without intervention. To date, however, there has been no large-scale peer-reviewed publication that confirms the existence of a phenomenon similar to that described by MacDougall. From the perspective of modern science, the concept of the soul as an element with mass remains outside the boundaries of accepted physics. Biological mechanisms are better understood than they were 100 years ago. Yet the answer to the question of consciousness and its physical trace still eludes us. What seems most interesting today is not so much the attempt to measure the soul as the quest to understand the phenomenon of existence itself, and what happens the moment life falls silent. Part 7. Does the soul really weigh 21 grams? More than 100 years after MacDougall's experiment, the question of the weight of the soul remains fascinating. While his research has not been deemed scientifically credible, the idea that something intangible could have a real impact on the physical world remains alive in people's imaginations. It's no longer just about the number, it's about what it represents, trying to measure that which, by definition, defies measurement. 21 grams has become a literary motif, an inspiration for films, and a subject of philosophical contemplation. For some, it is a number full of hope, a sign that we are more than just our bodies. For others, it is merely a random number, overinterpreted by a man who wanted to find something that would confirm his beliefs. Contemporary philosophy of mind proposes various models of consciousness, from information theory to emergence concepts, according to which the mind is not a separate entity, but a property of complex biological systems. In these approaches, there is no place for a physically separate soul. On the other hand, spirituality and religion still describe the soul as the key to understanding existence, morality, and identity. The question remains important because it touches the core of the human condition. If the soul exists, can it be studied? If not, where do our sense of self, intuitions, and inner experiences come from that cannot be fully described by chemical reactions? We may never know the final answer. Perhaps the value of 21 grams says nothing about reality, and everything about our need to understand. What do you think? Does the soul really have weight, or is it just a metaphor? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe if you like, and see you in the next episode.